Hi, Dennis Bills from life-skills.com.au here again. Today I was going to talk about budgeting in general for young people in the throes of transition and how to manage their money and make the most of their modest incomes. But instead today I'm going to dedicate this video to talking about job seeker and young people who are either on job seeker or about to move on to job seeker. And I'll save budgeting in general for my next video. So let's talk about job seeker, but especially the effects of the most recent changes to job seeker for young Australians between the ages of 15 and 24, especially since the job seeker coronavirus supplement is about to be wound back by $150 a fortnight and instead be replaced by a $50 per fortnight increase, which will leave most job seeker recipients at least $100 per fortnight worse off. And all this is happening at the exact same time as the JobKeeper payment has also come to an end. So as of today, there's an expectation that at least 150,000 Australians will move from JobKeeper to job seeker, and amongst those 150,000 there will be a large number of young adult Australians, because you know where those young people who are no longer eligible for JobKeeper are going to end up, don't you? Especially if their employers can no longer afford to keep them on. But today, rather than focus on the politics of the changes, I'll leave that to others. I mostly want to talk about whether, according to my estimations, young unemployed people will actually be able to survive on the new job seeker amount. But firstly, just for a moment, I'd like you to indulge me as I delve into the facts and statistics in regard to unemployment, mainly so that those young people who are unemployed or about to register as unemployed gain an insight into the bigger picture, but also understand that being unemployed is not a sin or a reflection of their education, their character or their work ethic, but is in fact one of the avoidable realities of being a young person and finding yourself on the fringes of the worlds of employment and careers through no fault of their own. As of February 2021, there were 805,200 unemployed people in Australia, or 5.8% of the workforce, while the underemployment rate, that is those people who have identified that they're not receiving enough work, stands at 8.5% of the workforce. For those 805,200 people who were registered as unemployed in February 2021, there were 174,000 ANZ job ads posted, or one job ad per 4.6 job applicants. The ANZ job ad advertisement series is a popular economic tool used for measuring monthly employment availability in Australia and widely recognised as one of the most accurate measures of job availability. Of course, once COVID-19 struck, it was expected that dramatic job cuts would be inevitable. Many of the first to be let go by the employers would be the last to be employed, but especially casual employees and, of course, young people. But here's the thing about the statistics in regard to the number of unemployed people versus the number of available jobs. And that is that ever since I've been following these statistics, which is about 20 years, there have always been far more unemployed people than there have been available jobs. So even if you doubled the number of jobs available on any given month, perhaps to make up for all those jobs that aren't advertised, and maybe to cover the so-called hidden jobs market, or jobs that aren't advertised because they are taken up by friends of friends or family members or members of an extended social network, even then every second unemployed person would still be out of work, which in today's numbers would still amount to over 400,000 people who are officially unemployed. And that's without even considering the number of people who have given up completely on looking for work, many of whom will either be living in poverty or are perhaps being supported by family and friends or welfare. To understand just how many eligible workers are actually taking part in employment, the best place to look is at the economic measure we call the participation rate. And currently, the participation rate in Australia is around 66%. That means that 66 out of every 100 people that are currently eligible for work are actively taking part in the world of employment, which means that 34% aren't. So you can read into that whatever you will. And let's not forget that to be counted as employed in this country, all you have to do is work 1 hour of paid work per week. So when you look at the bigger picture of unemployment, but especially after you take the underemployment rate into consideration, along with the participation rate, as well as the actual definition of what it means to be employed in this country, you get a much more comprehensive picture of just how many people there are out there trying to find a place in the jobs market that isn't anywhere near as fruitful as some people would have us think. Of course, the simple truth is that there are not enough jobs in the country to go around, which is especially true for young people, because while overall unemployment in February 2021 was 5.8%, youth unemployment over the same period was 12.9%. But in late 2020, it was actually 16.4%, which is also the highest it's been in 23 years. And so, given that there's 3.125 million young Australians between the ages of 15 and 24, 12.9% means that I suppose the good news is that in December 2020, that number was actually 1 in 3 young Australians who were either unemployed or underemployed. So at least the figures have improved since those last statistics were taken. Unfortunately, though, it's also been suggested that this current trend could last for another decade, and the ramifications of this current trend. And of course, the statistics are even worse in regional areas where there will often be 15 plus applicants for a single job. And for Indigenous youth, the statistics are even more damning. An analysis by the University of New South Wales Social Policy Research Centre and the Australian Council of Social Services shows nationwide there is 1 job advertised for every 8 people on job seeker or youth allowance. When it comes to entry-level positions, the ratio rises to 1 job for every 48 people on social security, and it's expected to rise further now that JobKeeper has ended. To top all that off, in a recent survey, just 0.5% of the available positions advertised online were advertised with no experience required. So you can only imagine the repercussions that a figure like this has for the young people in our communities. So for those young people who are currently experiencing or about to become unemployed, I guess the point I'm trying to make is that the problem is not you. The problem is not you. The problem is the system. It's just that I'm not too sure what comfort you can take from any of the data I've just presented if you're currently unemployed, other than at least gaining an understanding that you haven't done anything wrong and that you're not at fault and that you're not alone in this situation. At the moment, any low-skilled, inexperienced young worker trying to find employment in an economy that's primarily made up of part-time and casual jobs for young people is always going to be vulnerable to any adverse economic conditions. And that's also the reason that youth unemployment is always higher and more unstable than overall unemployment. Youth unemployment rate statistics are also skewed by the relatively high number of young people currently in study. Young workers are also the least qualified with the lowest levels of relevant skills, and that makes them less employable. Young people who are unemployed also find it hard to break the cycle of no job, therefore no experience, which makes it even harder to get a job. It's just that by having such a significant amount of our young people out of work can also have quite a negative impact on the economic growth and development of our communities. And if left unchecked, youth unemployment can also have serious social repercussions, because unemployed youth will often tend to feel as if they've been left out, which in turn leads to degrees of social exclusion, anxiety, and a lack of hope for the future. So if there's anyone out there who still thinks that someone who's receiving a job seeker payment is basically getting a free ride at the expense of the rest of society, then to put it simply, based on the raw data, you're wrong. You're so wrong that it's unbelievable. Because if that really is the case, then why aren't there more people being penalised for refusing to work, especially given that there's an actual government hotline that allows employers to dob in employees who refuse work? And yet in the last reporting period, only 114 payments were suspended out of more than 1 million. That's 0.01%. The statistics don't lie. That being said, I'm in no doubt that there will always be people who will seek to take advantage of the system. The real truth is that these people are an absolute minority. The problem is that their actions also tend to foster tragically unfair biases against every other unemployed person in the country, and that's unfair. Okay, so let's get down to the raw numbers. The new job seeker amount for a single is $620.80 per fortnight, or around $310 per week. According to welfare agencies, that's about $250 per week below the poverty line, which seems especially harsh when you consider that 2/3 of unemployed people will remain unemployed for 12 months, while 20% will remain unemployed for 5 years. In addition to JobSeeker, young people who have left home and are living away from home are also eligible for rental assistance. The maximum allowable fortnightly amount for rental assistance for a single is around $70. So if you're also receiving the full amount of JobSeeker, then you're basically looking at living on around $380 per week. So the big question is, can it be done? Well, let's see. In regard to creating a budget, I'm going to keep this as simple as possible, especially since there are so many potential variations and circumstances. So mainly I intend to focus on young single people living away from home, though most of my estimations will be able to be adjusted to many other circumstances. I just hope the figures I'm about to present will give you some indication of your position and some idea of what you're going to need to do to make the most of your own personal situation. I should also warn you that I'm going to be blunt about what you need to do to survive, with an absolute focus on the things you need and not the things you want. This is about cutting corners, this is about budgeting to the full extent, and this is about living so close to the edge that there's no room for any mistakes. So what I intend to do is I'll keep a running cost on screen as we go through the figures, as well as provide you with any relevant links that I can think of in the comments section below this video. So let's look at someone who's getting the full JobSeeker amount and also getting a living away from home rental allowance. So that's $310 a week from JobSeeker and $70 a week from rental assistance. When I was going through the costs of rental in the capital cities in Australia for an average house, in Sydney the last figure I got was $540 a week. In Melbourne it was $430 a week. In Adelaide it was $395 a week. In Perth it was $370 a week, and in Darwin $480 a week, and Hobart $450 a week. So what I'm basing my living away from home allowance budget on is that the young person is living in a shared home with possibly 3 other people, so 4 people to a home. So you're basically looking at a 4-bedroom home. Now, when it comes to 4-bedroom homes, they are often quite a deal more expensive than 3-bedroom homes. So the rental figures per capital city that I just quoted could actually be different to that, and I'd expect them to, in most cases, be higher. The maximum amount that I think you should allow for your rent out of your $380 a week is $130 per week. That means if there are 4 of you, you're looking at around over $500 to rent a house. Now that's also assuming that you've been able to get enough credentials together and enough of a portfolio to actually be eligible to rent a property in the first place, because landlords are fussy and they're careful when they rent to young people, and for you to actually get into a property and to have to actually acknowledge that you're unemployed is going to make things difficult. So if you can get over those hurdles and get the right referees and references, and you've got a good track record of renting properties, then you should be in with a show if you're lucky. But you won't be able to rent a house on your own, and you won't be able to rent a house with just a couple. You're going to need 4 people. So perhaps 2 couples, perhaps 4 friends, but I would recommend that you share a house with at least 3 other people. So that's $130. Food, if you're prepared to prepare your own food and not eat out, if you're prepared to shop to a budget and shop to a menu, then you should be able to eat for $70 a week per person in the house. And that should allow you to have a cooked main meal every night, and cereals and toasts and coffees and teas for breakfast, and mueslis and the like, and sandwiches and the like for lunch. It's that simple, but there are lots of variations to a menu like that, but you should be able to do it for around $70 per week per person, and that's $280 a week grocery shop for the house. But you'll all have to eat more or less the same food, and you all have to pitch in for the preparation and the cooking and the chores and the rosters. If you go outside of that and eat Uber Eats, takeaways, you're going to blow your budget in a moment. And unfortunately, you're not going to be able to eat takeaway food, and you're not going to be able to go out for food. You're going to have to eat at home, and you're going to have to prepare your meals in advance. And that it will often include cooking in bulk and then using freezer storage to prepare meals in advance and have spares up your sleeve. And those little Chinese takeaway plastic containers are pretty good for things like that, to prepare portions of meals. So with food, you're up to $200 a week. I'm allowing $30 a week for your telecommunications, your telephone, but that probably means that you won't be able to go on a plan, or if you do go on a plan, you're going to have to be very careful and make sure you get enough data. But you'd want unlimited calls, and young people, you're going to need 30 gig of data a week, I'm thinking. Particularly if you're streaming, and if you're streaming things to your TV and so on. But you won't be able to afford an $80 a month or $100 a month phone plan plus data. You're going to have to shop around, and you can shop around online, and you can use CanStar to get good estimations on what phone plans are available and at what price. But if you allow $30 a week for your phone, that's $200 and other data, so that might include internet as well. That's $230, a running total of $230. Now, in regard to power and gas and water, and depends on your agreement in regard to water rates and what excess you're going to have to pay. But I've allowed $30 per person per week for the power, water, and gas costs. So that gives you a running total of $260. Now, the other thing is transport or owning a car. Now, if you already own a car, you're probably going to have to allow close to $100 a week to run your car, because I would imagine if you are partaking trying to partake in a regular life, it's going to cost you between $30 and $50 a week just in petrol. And then you've got to allow for maintenance, tyres, running costs, registrations, insurances and the like. So I've allowed a running cost for a car of $100 a week, giving you a total of $360 for your cost of living for the week up to then. Or if you don't have a car, you will be using public transport, but you probably won't be able to afford to use taxis and Uber. You're probably going to have to use raw public transport, get concession tickets and use buses and trains, and they will probably cost you at least half the cost of running a car, maybe more depending on where you've got to travel to and what time of the day you're going, and whether you're getting an ongoing ticket or you're buying one-off tickets. But at the moment, with a car, and a lot of young people already have cars, we're up to $360 for the week, leaving $20 miscellaneous. Now, in that $20, you've got to be able to cover things like clothing and footwear. You've got to be able to cover medical items other than Medicare. You've got to cover, if possible, any entertainment or social events that you're going to continue to take part in or try and take part in. You've got to cover, possibly cover travel to keep in touch with family, education costs, job search, travel requirements, and just the repairs and general maintenance of your own equipment. So there are other things on top of that as well. So basically, can you live on JobSeeker with the rental assistance? Yes, you can live on it. How long can you survive on it is the question, because you are always going to eventually go above that mark unless you restrict and contract your lifestyle down to the absolute bare minimum, which is counterintuitive if you think that if you understand that what you're trying to do is get back into the jobs market and maintain your contacts with society and maintain your social contacts and maintain some semblance of your previous lifestyle. So in the longer term, $380 a week is not enough, and almost every young person that I've ever dealt with who's been living on job seeker or the equivalent over a longer period has run into financial difficulty and financial disrepair, and often been faced with various types of bankruptcy at the same time. So job seeker, even with the $50 per fortnight amount being added, is not enough. It won't sustain anyone in the longer term, and it is a very short-term fix. And if you take into account those statistics I said earlier about people being on job seeker for longer periods, then those people are without doubt going to run into financial difficulties, and unfortunately in a lot of cases it's not going to be a happy ending. A study by Dixon and Cass and White in 1991, 92 and 1988, studies by those three, found that the personal and social costs of unemployment include severe financial hardship and poverty, debt, homelessness and housing stress, family tensions and breakdown, boredom, alienation, shame and stigma, increased social isolation, crime, erosion of confidence and self-esteem, the atrophying of work skills and ill health. Most of these will also increase with the duration of unemployment. Unemployed people report that being unemployed is one of the worst things that can happen to them. In addition, unemployment falls disproportionately on already disadvantaged groups in society. For example, lower income earners, recently arrived migrants, Indigenous Australians and young people. So I'm sorry to say that job seeker will sustain you for a short period, but in the longer term you are not going to get a job seeker payment. And although I'd like to give you better news than that, there will be some people who will be able to manage for longer than others. It's going to take discipline, it's going to take a dedication, it's going to take a plan, and it's going to take you sticking to that plan rigidly to make sure you make it through from one week to the next. The solution is a job, and at the moment the jobs market for young people is pretty tight, and the way that we manage young people in their transitions from secondary school and home into life thereafter is reasonably ordinary, and we need to be better at it. So unfortunately that's what I've found through my research, and it's not so much different to the same research I did for my original book, Don't Leave Home Without One, almost 15 years ago. The amounts of money that we allocate for young unemployed people, or unemployed people in general, to live on is not enough. And for those people who think that they can live on it, I'd like to see you try. So next chapter we'll talk about budgeting in general for those young people who are fortunate enough to have a few dollars extra, but we'll just talk about other means of cutting corners that are also appropriate to young people who are trying to survive on job seeker. So thanks for your time, and we'll talk again soon.